At my baby shower, my mother-in-law declared, "This child will be raised by me, not you." My husband nodded and handed her a set of keys. Furious, I grabbed my phone and said, "You might want to check the locks first." She screamed when she realized. I should have seen the signs earlier. Looking back, all the little things add up, and I feel like an idiot for not connecting the dots sooner. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened at my own baby shower. I had spent months planning that day, carefully choosing the decorations, the food, the guest list. It was supposed to be a celebration of my baby, of the life I was about to bring into the world. But instead, it turned into the moment everything in my marriage and my life unraveled. The moment my husband and his mother showed me exactly where I stood. And the moment I decided I was done playing the fool. The warning signs I ignored from the very beginning, my mother-in-law, Susan, had been difficult. That's putting it lightly. Overbearing, intrusive, manipulative, those are better words for her. She had a way of making herself the center of everything, twisting situations to make herself look like the victim while controlling everything in the background. When I first got pregnant, she wasn't happy. She wasn't unhappy either. It was this weird mix of disappointment and smugness, like she knew something I didn't. I didn't get it at first. My husband, Mike, and I had been married for 3 years. We had stable jobs, a home, a good life. A baby was the next step. But the way Susan reacted, it was like she thought she was the one having a baby. She immediately started making decisions for me. "You'll need to quit your job, of course," she said one evening when she and Mike were over for dinner. I frowned. "I never said I was quitting." She scoffed. "Oh, honey, babies need their mothers 24/7. You can't just go running off to work and leaving the baby with strangers." Mike said nothing. He just kept eating. Then she started redecorating one of her rooms for the baby. Not helping us set up the nursery in our home, no, she was turning one of her bedrooms into a fully furnished nursery, as if the baby would be staying there. I told Mike it made me uncomfortable. He brushed it off. "She's just excited," he said. "Let her have this." I let it go. Then she started calling my baby her baby. "My baby is going to have the best," she would say. "My baby is going to be so loved." At first, I thought it was just a weird grandma thing. But the more she said it, the more I felt like she wasn't joking. Then there were the doctor's appointments. She invited herself to every single one. If I told her no, she'd get Mike to tell me I was being difficult. The few times she came, she asked the doctor questions for me, as if I wasn't in the room. "She's not going to do one of those silly natural births, right?" she asked once. "I don't want her in pain. Just schedule the C-section." I had no words. Again, I told Mike. Again, he brushed it off. "She just wants to help." I let it go. I shouldn't have. The baby shower from hell. The baby shower was at our house, the one I decorated, the one I planned. My best friend, Hannah, helped me set everything up. It was beautiful. A table full of food, soft blue and yellow decorations. We were keeping the gender a surprise, and all the people who mattered. Or so I thought. Susan arrived, grand as ever, acting like she was the guest of honor. She brought her own cake, her own decorations, even a freaking banner with her name on it, and acted like she was hosting the whole thing. She greeted me like I was just another guest. "You look tired, dear," she said, loudly, so everyone could hear. "Are you sure you're taking care of our baby properly?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine." She patted my belly, way too familiar. "Well, don't worry. I'll be there to make sure everything is done right once the baby is here." I laughed it off. A tense, forced laugh. Then, during the gift opening, she stood up, cleared her throat, and clinked a glass. Like she was about to give a wedding toast. Everyone turned to her. She smiled, wide and self-satisfied. "I just want to say how excited I am for this baby," she announced. "My baby? And I want you all to know that this child will be raised by me, not," she waved a dismissive hand toward me, "not her. We all know who the real mother figure will be." The room fell silent. I felt my breath leave my body. Then, before I could even react, Mike stood up. And nodded. Then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, he pulled something from his pocket. Keys. And he handed them to her. "Here, Mom," he said. "I made copies. You'll have full access to everything." The room spun. People gasped. Hannah grabbed my arm. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I wasn't. I stared at the keys. Then at Mike. Then at Susan, who looked smug. That was it. That was the moment something snapped inside me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and smiled. "You might want to check the locks first." Susan's face twisted in confusion. I hit the button on my phone, and somewhere in the house, a beep sounded. "Surprise," I said, my voice cold. "I changed the locks yesterday." The room erupted. Susan shrieked. Actually, shrieked. "You did what?" Mike turned to me, his face red. "What the hell, my name?" I stood. My heart was pounding, but I refused to let them see me break. You actually thought I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't see what you two were planning? I turned to Susan. This isn't your baby. This isn't your house. You will never have control over me, my child, or my life. Susan's face went red. You ungrateful little... I held up a hand. Save it. And as for those keys, you can keep them. They won't work. She screamed. A full, rage-filled, horror movie-worthy scream. And Mike? He just stood there. Like a useless, stunned idiot. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a boundary issue. This was something way deeper. And I wasn't about to sit around and be treated like a surrogate for my own child. I took one last look at the woman I had once called my mother-in-law. Then at the man I had once called my husband. And I walked away. Because this was far from over. As I walked out of that baby shower, I felt every eye on me. The whispers, the gasps, the awkward shifting of feet, it all blurred together. My hand shook as I gripped my phone, but I kept my head high. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Behind me, Susan was still screaming. You can't do this, she shrieked. This is my grandchild. You have no right to keep me out. And then, Mike. His voice was quieter, but somehow it cut even deeper. Jesus, my name, he muttered. Why are you making this so difficult? 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 I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. Hannah caught my arm, steadying me. My voice came out sharp, furious. Difficult? You and your mother just stood here, in front of everyone, and decided I'm not even going to raise my own child. And you think I'm the problem? Mike ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean it like that. Oh, really? Then how did you mean it? I shot back. He opened his mouth. Closed it. He had nothing. Susan stepped forward, her face twisted in rage. You are being incredibly immature, young lady. You have no idea what you're doing. A good mother would put her child's needs first. I let out a bitter laugh. Right. And somehow, you're the one who decides what's best for my baby? Not me. She straightened her back, her chin lifted in that arrogant way she always did when she thought she had the upper hand. I know what's best. I raised Mike, didn't I? Oh, that was the wrong thing to say. I turned to Mike, and for the first time, I really looked at him. At the man who had let his mother bulldoze every part of our marriage. At the man who had handed her a copy of our house keys without even telling me. At the man who had just stood there, nodding, as his mother announced my baby would be raised by her. And suddenly, it all became so painfully clear. This wasn't just about Susan. It was about him, too. And that realization? It burned. A secret comes out. I didn't respond to Susan. I didn't waste another second on her. Instead, I looked Mike dead in the eye and said, How long has this been planned? His jaw clenched. What? I crossed my arms over my belly. Don't play dumb. You don't just hand someone a set of house keys out of nowhere. So, how long? How long have you two been planning to take my baby from me? He looked away. That was answer enough. Susan scoffed. Oh, don't be dramatic. We're not taking the baby from you, we're simply ensuring the child is raised properly. I laughed, short and humorless. Properly. Right. Meaning, you're in charge. I'm just what, some vessel? A temporary inconvenience. Mike finally spoke, but his voice was quieter. Almost nervous. Mom was just trying to make things easier. Easier. I felt my stomach churn. For who, Mike? Because it sure as hell wasn't for me. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, you're going to be exhausted. It just makes sense for Mom to take on more responsibility. I stared at him. You mean control? He didn't deny it. I turned to Hannah. Get my bag. Susan's face twisted. You are not leaving. I met her gaze, unflinching. Watch me. I took 2 steps toward the door, and then Susan blurted out something that stopped me cold. Mike already signed the custody agreement. Silence. Pure, deafening silence. I felt my breath catch. What did you just say? Susan's lips curled into something ugly. I said. She took a slow, smug step toward me, that Mike already signed a custody agreement. So whether you like it or not, I will have rights to my grandchild. My heart pounded in my chest. My hands clenched into fists. I turned to Mike, begging him with my eyes to tell me this wasn't true. But the guilt on his face said everything. Mike, my voice shook. Tell me she's lying. He didn't. I felt something inside me snap. My whole world tilted. Mike, my husband, the man I had trusted, the man I had planned a family with, had gone behind my back and legally given his mother access to my child? I could barely breathe. Hannah grabbed my arm. We need to go. I nodded numbly. I felt like I was moving underwater. Susan, though? She wasn't done. As I reached for the door, she said one last thing that made my blood turn to ice. You should be grateful, dear, she purred. After all, considering who the father really is, it's a miracle we're even letting you stay involved at all. The room spun. What? My voice was barely above a whisper. Susan just smiled. Mike's face went ghostly white. Hannah's grip on my arm tightened. Do not listen to her. But I already knew. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Mike's weird behavior. Susan's possessiveness. The hushed conversations that would stop whenever I entered a room. And the way Susan always made comments about how the baby's father was family. Oh God. I wasn't just fighting for my child. I had been fighting against a lie this entire time. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in, trapping me inside a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Susan's words echoed in my head. Considering who the father really is. Mike looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face had gone completely pale, his hands fidgeting at his sides. He looked at his mother, then at me, silent. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I took a step forward, my legs trembling. Tell me what she means. Mike shook his head, eyes darting to Susan. Mom, stop. Susan just smiled. Smug. Confident. Like she had already won. Oh, darling, she cooed. You really should have paid more attention to your own husband. A sickening feeling twisted in my stomach. My voice was barely above a whisper. Mike, he swallowed hard. She's just trying to make you mad. Then say it, I snapped, my voice breaking. Say she's lying. Nothing. He wouldn't. He couldn't. I felt the room shift. The way the air changed, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, making it harder to breathe. Jesus Christ, Hannah whispered beside me. Mike, what the hell did you do? I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to believe it. The truth comes out who? My voice cracked. Who, Mike? Susan let out a low, satisfied laugh. Oh, sweetie. You've met him plenty of times. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I knew. Before she even said it, I knew. But nothing could prepare me for the words that came next. Your baby's real father, Susan said, drawing out the moment, savoring it, is Mike's brother. The world stopped. Everything blurred. The voices around me, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, nothing felt real anymore. Mike's brother? No, my voice was hoarse. You're lying. Susan tilted her head. Am I? I turned to Mike, my entire body shaking. Tell me she's lying. Mike couldn't even look at me. Tears burned in my eyes. Tell me you didn't let me marry you, stay with you, get pregnant with you, while knowing this wasn't even your baby. Finally, he spoke. I thought it was mine, he whispered. My stomach dropped. I felt like I was going to be sick. What? Mike ran a hand down his face, his whole body tense. I thought it was mine, he repeated, voice raw. At first. But then, he exhaled sharply. Mom made me take a DNA test. I stared at him, unable to process his words. When? His jaw clenched. 2 months ago. 2 months ago. 2 months of knowing. 2 months of lying to my face. 2 months of letting me plan our future, our family, our life, when he knew the baby wasn't his. My head spun. I had to grab the back of a chair to steady myself. Hannah gasped. Oh my God. You knew this whole time. Mike's silence was deafening. And Susan? She was thrilled. See, dear, she purred, stepping closer. That's why we needed a plan. This child belongs to our family, and we won't let you ruin that. I snapped. This isn't your decision. I screamed. This is my baby. You had no right to. Susan rolled her eyes. Oh, grow up. You should be thanking me. Imagine if this had come out later, how humiliating that would be for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was acting like this was a favor. Like she hadn't just destroyed my entire world. I turned back to Mike, my voice sharp. Did you even think about telling me? He hesitated. I didn't know how. I let out a bitter laugh. So instead, you just handed your mother the keys to our house and let her decide everything for you? He flinched. I was trying to do the right thing. The right thing? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Susan cut in before I could respond. Listen, dear. You're not losing anything. We'll make sure you're taken care of. You can still be in the baby's life, just not as the primary parent. My breath caught. You mean, you want me to hand over custody? Susan smiled sweetly. Not hand over, she said. Just acknowledge what's best. You're not really family anymore, dear. But we'll let you stay involved. Let me. Like I was some outsider in my own child's life. I felt the rage building in me. I had spent my entire pregnancy thinking I was building a family. But the truth? I had been surrounded by liars. And they weren't going to take my baby from me. I straightened my back, my hands steady. You don't get to decide that. Susan's eyes darkened. I think you'll find, dear, that we have quite a bit of influence. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't just a toxic mother-in-law situation. This was a fight. And I wasn't about to lose. The breaking point, the room felt thick with tension, suffocating. Every person there had gone silent, watching the scene unfold like it was some twisted soap opera. Hannah was gripping my arm so tightly I could feel her nails digging into my skin. But I barely noticed. My entire focus was locked on them, Mike and Susan, the two people who had just obliterated everything I thought I knew about my life. I wasn't just betrayed. I was set up. And now, they were standing there, acting like I should be grateful for their plans to take my baby away. I could feel my body trembling, but it wasn't from fear. It was rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. I took a slow, measured breath and turned to Susan. You really think you can just take my baby? She smiled like she had already won. Sweetheart, we don't think we know. Mike already signed the custody paperwork. There's nothing you can do. I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh that didn't even sound like my own. You think that piece of paper means anything? You really think I won't fight you? Susan's expression hardened. It's not a fight, dear. It's what's best. You're just too emotional to see it right now. Mike, still silent, was staring at the floor like a guilty child. I wanted to scream at him. Shake him. Make him say something. Instead, I turned back to Susan and forced my voice to stay steady. You should have read the fine print. She narrowed her eyes. Excuse me? I took out my phone, pulled up my email, and smiled. You weren't the only one making legal moves, Susan, I said, my voice cool. You and Mike were so busy planning behind my back that you didn't even notice what I was doing. Her smug expression faltered. What are you talking about? I turned my phone around so she could see it. An official document. From my lawyer. A custody agreement, I said, watching the color drain from her face. One that names me as the sole legal guardian. One that strips Mike of all parental rights for trying to sign away custody without my consent. The entire room gasped. Susan staggered back like I had slapped her. You wouldn't. Oh, I would. I cut in. And I did. Mike's head snapped up. Wait. What? I turned to him now, my voice like ice. 2 weeks ago, when I started to notice something was off, I went to a lawyer. Told them I had suspicions. Told them about how your mother was trying to push me out of my own baby's life. And guess what? I took a step closer, my voice dripping with venom. Turns out, a father who secretly signs custody paperwork without the mother's knowledge? That's grounds for immediate termination of parental rights. Mike reeled back like I had punched him. No, that's not. Oh, but it is, I said, shoving my phone closer to his face. It's all right here. And guess what else? The moment this baby is born, I can, and will, file for a restraining order against both of you. Susan's face turned red. You conniving little. I stepped forward, cutting her off. No, Susan. You don't get to talk. Not anymore. You thought you could control me? Thought you could push me aside and raise my baby like I was just some disposable incubator. I took another step, my voice shaking with fury. You were wrong. Susan screamed. Actually screamed. A raw, rage-filled shriek that made the entire room flinch. You can't do this, she howled. You can't just cut us out. I tilted my head, my lips curling into a dangerous smile. Funny. That's exactly what you were trying to do to me. Mike grabbed my arm, his grip desperate. Please, my name. We can fix this. I yanked my arm away. Oh, now you want to talk? My voice cracked. You knew, Mike. You knew this wasn't your baby. You knew 2 months ago, and you didn't say a damn thing. And instead of being honest, instead of telling me the truth, you let your mother, I gestured wildly at Susan, who was still seething, make plans to take my baby away from me. He looked like he wanted to argue. To beg. I wasn't interested. You made your choice, I said, my voice hollow now. And now, you get to live with it. Susan lunged toward me, but Hannah stepped in front of her. You touch her, and I will personally make sure you never see that baby or daylight again, she hissed. I had never loved Hannah more than in that moment. Susan shook with fury, but for the first time, she looked scared. Because she had lost. And she knew it. The immediate aftermath, I left that baby shower and never looked back. Mike tried to call. Begged to meet. Sent texts saying we could work something out. I ignored him. A week later, I had the paperwork finalized. I legally ensured that the moment my child was born, Susan would have 0 rights. I moved out. Found my own place. Built my own life. And when my baby finally arrived, healthy, perfect, mine, I held them close and whispered, you're safe. Safe from manipulation. Safe from control. Safe from people who never really saw me as their mother. Mike? He didn't even fight it in court. He knew he had no case. Susan? She tried. Oh, she tried. Filed for grandparents' rights. Threatened to take me to court. Sent letters. Harassment. She tried every dirty trick in the book. She lost. Every single time. And me? I moved on. I healed. And I made a promise to myself that no one, not a husband, not a mother-in-law, not anyone would ever take control of my life again. Because I won. And I would never let them forget it. The end.